It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing another reaction discussion video that was suggested by a few of you guys in the Discord community. So appreciate you guys suggesting this, and I just want to say, if you want to be able to suggest your own videos for discussions, you can go ahead and join the Discord community, link in the description. Go ahead and scroll down and hit the knife emoji that you can accept the rules, speak with the rest of us about whether it be, DVD stuff, movies, books, anime, comics, whatever it may be. We have everything there that you can just talk about whatever you want. And as we know, this is a bit of a trilogy, I think we have with terms of these videos, because unfortunately here this video is from Skrump, who is video is titled "Perks Are Hurting Dead by Daylight." Now, as you can probably imagine, we already know how this is going to go.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
These days, gen regression in Dead by Daylight is actually in a really good state.
As anybody who maybe is curious, we have two other videos that I can link, at least both of them, at the end of this one, so you can watch them in order if you'd like. Now we're back again for yet another one talking about perks. So it's almost like we're just on a streak here. So let's just go ahead and give it a listen.
Not nearly as much. Thanks to the sheer number of perks in the game, and the fact that more and more are added with every new chapter added to Dead by Daylight, that means it gets harder and harder to balance all of them, leaving some perks in a broken state for far too long, or some perks not getting the buffs they desperately need. For example, you have a perk like Bloodhound, which has had the same basic use for the game's entire lifespan. It makes...
He's making a valid point. I give it that. The idea that he's trying to pitch here is that because there's too many perks, less and less of them make an impact, and therefore you end up getting kind of some perks that just kind of consistently stay ridiculous for quite a while, which is understandable. I can agree with that, but there's more.
Blood pool's easier to see. That's awesome. Maybe that was useful back when the maps were much darker, but nowadays, well, it's no wonder why around 1% of players are actually using it. Maybe it's good for new players, but past that, well, I mean, it speaks for itself. This works in the inverse way too. A lot of people dislike the perk Hyper Focus, as it can easily be used to break gen speed if paired with the right build. But because it's not super common, it's around a 3% pick rate, it's been completely untouched by behavior since the release of the second Resident Evil chapter.
So that statement right there is very telling, right? Because if we take into account what Skrump has been stating since the last two videos that we've covered, that means that he's only purely going off of the pick rate, which wherever he's getting this data from, he didn't state it, but he's going off of the fact that the pick rate is being 3%, so now it's not magically not common. Now, because of that, then he's trying to state that gen speed isn't the problem because hyperfocus is rare. Now, I think the problem that I guess he's not realizing is the fact that just because something can happen once every blue moon that affects the balance of the game to this extent, it's somehow not a problem. And I think that that's where the issue lies with a lot of people who are disagreeing with the statements that he's been stating, because it's a bit of an imbalance where somehow, like, the one side can have things that are just picked very quickly, I mean, not quickly, but have a high pick rate. Like, we can look at Deadlock for an example. Very inoffensive perk. It just blocks the gen that has the most progress when one gets done. It used to be 30 seconds, and then it got nerfed. We never understood why. All we understood was that it had a high pick rate, so they just nerfed it. So if we compare the two, right, we go, okay, one just did nothing. It just blocks the gen. That's fine. They could easily start a different gen and, la-di-da. But yet a perk that's been used multiple times to create the fastest gens in the West. I mean, it even helped with world records for world record like games ending in like 2 minutes. For some reason, that's not been changed. So, of course, people's frustration with the perk is stemming from the fact that, oh, I don't know, it's possible to do those things. Like, I just don't understand why that's like such a confusion. But that's why people hate this perk, you know, and its existence, because of the fact that it can do that. Combined with other perks that they've added already, being like the 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, you're getting these insane perk, like, you know, these perks combining to create gen speeds that are under 30 seconds or less. So of course people are going to be frustrated with this. So that I just think is really strange. But yeah, like that's at least the impression I'm getting. Because of the pick rate being low, all of a sudden it means gen regression's fine, which it just is a false equivalent, because people are reaching crazy gen speeds even without hyperfocus. So what is the explanation behind that? And then he'll turn it into, oh, but macro somehow, which, as we've covered in the previous video, does not make any sense.
Or if you wanted, you could point to Decisive Strike, which was absolutely broken for years before getting properly nerfed. Now, I don't think that this issue exists entirely because behavior is lazy or something like that. I guess you could say that if you wanted to. But for me personally, I just think there are too many perks to consistently be rebalancing and reworking in order to make them useful in the current state of the game. The pace of Dead by Daylight matches has
I honestly disagree that because of perk amount, therefore it's hard to balance. Like, no, that just simply isn't the case. That just simply is not true. Because it's not difficult to understand what perks are being selected and why. That's just that's why everybody can go around and say that behavior is just not understanding their goddamn game, because if they understand their game, they'd understand why things are meta. They'll understand why things aren't selected. They'd understand pick rates. They'd understand these things. But they don't. They don't play their game. They don't actually play tests. They don't do anything, any due diligence to understand their game better. So that just isn't accurate. Because if you understand, a DVD player can tell you, yeah, Windows makes sense because Shift W to yellow. Makes sense. Pre-drop easy. Shift W meta. Boom. Versus like you're picking something like, what's that one called? What's that perk where you break the totem and then it gets your health state back? I forgot what it was called. Or something like self-care, for example, too. People don't pick these perks really usually because it's like it takes a lot of time to have to get off of a gen to then touch a totem, right? And then self-care as well. Super slow by itself. You don't want to run it by itself. You usually want to pair it with a healing bonus. But that's just obvious to people who play the game. Probably not obvious to the devs who are just kind of worrying more about the development of the next thing. Not really worrying about what's already in the game. So it's just kind of strange to me. Like I don't know. Like I don't know why that's such a foreign concept. Keep in mind as well, like the only things that they really should be balancing is the stuff that gets picked that like with the drastic amounts, right? And in the sense of understanding why they're picked and what their effects are and how it affects a match, I think should be priority, which is not really that crazy when you consider other perks that just do barely anything, right? So those perks in general should not even be touched because they're fine where they're at. Like if it's like, oh, here's counter force, you could break totems faster. You're not breaking the game with breaking a totem quicker. Like that's just not how that works. But if you look at something like the meta stuff, like Windows, like Balanced or Lithe or Drama or whatever, Vigil, like Ghost Notes, these things cause massive impacts to chases and maps and all these other things. Those should be looked at way quicker. So I don't know. I just disagree that because palettes, I disagree that because the amount of perks are so high, it's somehow so hard to balance. Like, no, it's really not. Oh boy, this is a doozy that we've been waiting for. This is exactly what we've been waiting for.
quick, just in case you don't know, killer power disparity can simply be described as some killers not being as strong as some others. So, you know, any tier list video you've ever seen. This is a super in-depth topic that can be talked about for hours, but for the sake of this video, I'm only going to be talking about the effects it has on perks and their designs. So, with that said, because killers and their designs are so diversified in their strength, even with killers who have similar powers, that means only certain perks will be able to appeal to those different killers, which is fine on some level. I honestly really like the idea of killers getting to experiment with different perks and finding ones that work really well with their powers, but it doesn't always happen like that. Some killers are far too strong compared to the rest of the killers in the game, and it shows based on what perks those killers can use compared to the other killers. Strong killers in Dead by Daylight have a lot more freedom when it comes to picking what perks to use, while the weaker ones will typically have to rely on perks that work with their powers specifically.
Okay, so let's take that into account, okay? We acknowledge that, oh yeah, you know, you kind of can't really run the same exact perks on every single killer. There's a disparity between killer strength, right? We know that. And we understand there's more flexibility with higher tiers compared to lower tiers. But yet, in the same breath, we're also taking into account that somehow gen regression's in a good spot. What are we, like, what? Like, I don't even understand, like, where we're going with this, because keep in mind, this is same creator. Gen regression's in a good spot, right? Apparently. But then on this one, we're also hearing, oh, but killers have the giant gap that from between strength levels, meaning that some killers have flexibility while others don't. So then which is it then? Because gen regression can't be in a good spot only for what, 3 to 4 killers, and the rest of the roster just suffers. Like that doesn't mean it's in a good spot then. Like, you then have to change your statement into saying it's a good spot for the high tiers. but then again, all the perks are good on high tiers. So like, what are we talking about? In the sense that they're unaffected by a lot of perks.
While Dead by Daylight typically prides itself on the diverse selection of options you have for matches to feel distinct from each other, that can feel straight up false if you're playing a weaker killer that can't try a variety of different perks in their matches. Believe it or not, Trapper would be much more interesting to play if he didn't rely on game slowdown like a crutch. Now, does that mean it's just a Trapper problem, or is it a perk problem? It's kind of both. It's behavior's fault that Trapper is so disgustingly unfair to play at times, but it's also unfair that some perks are designed to be used at their best by the strongest killers in the game. Think the difference between a Blight using barbecue and chili and a Ghostface using barbecue and chili. One killer is going to be able to get across the map faster to use that information a lot more than the other one. While this is enough of an issue concerning how different killers use the exact same perks, it also comes into a problematic spotlight again when considering how behavior has to balance perks for all the killers equally. There are no perks in the game that work differently depending on what killer you're playing, and that means that all of them are using the same perks. For a really good example of this, the perk Ultimate Weapon released with Xenomorph in a pretty strong state. On release, you could activate this perk by opening a locker. Once activated, it would cause the survivors within your tear radius to scream, revealing their positions and getting the blindness status effect for 30 seconds. However, it also moved with the killer's tear radius for that 30 seconds, which meant you could essentially bring it with you. Now, based on what you hear about it, does the perk sound overpowered? Maybe not. It sounds like a good perk, but not one that's too overbearing or unfun to play against. However, after the perk was released, it quickly got nerfed. Why, you ask? Well, because certain killers were able to use this perk to an annoying degree of effectiveness. Once they opened a locker, they were able to almost immediately get on a survivor's ass and start a chase, which, depending on the killer they were, probably wouldn't last long at all. Although, even when behavior nerfed this perk by giving it a shorter activation time and revealing auras instead of making survivors scream for a few seconds, that didn't even fix the issue. The strongest killers were still able to use that information really well, while the lower tier killers of the game still got screwed simply for the fact that they weren't as good from getting from point A to whatever survivor they saw at the time. Now, Ultimate Weapon aside, this is exactly what I mean when I say that balancing perks for all killers creates a lot of issues. Behavior can release a really good killer perk, but
there's a massive disconnect that we're having here, because keep in mind, like I've said, if gen regression was in a good spot, and yet gen regressions are perks, then how is it that gen regression could be in a good spot, but also not every killer can use every perk? There's just a disconnect there. Like, there really is a bit of a disparity in logic here, because like I've stated, and you can watch, for context, you can watch the other videos. If gen regression's in a good spot, right, then how is all of this true? Like, how is it that only some killers use some perks and S tiers are using it better than the low tiers? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit confusing, to be honest.
The strongest killers will always be able to make the most use out of it, and when they do, the perk gets nerfed, leaving the weaker killers without a perk they could definitely be using to level the playing field a little bit, which is exactly the design of perks that Behavior wanted, making it sting even more that it's handled this way. Perks are band-aids that Behavior loves using. As I mentioned before, there are perks for just about every issue you might have with the game, mostly. As a result, it's rare that Behavior tries to take a deeper look into their game to fix fundamental flaws with it, when they could just instead add a bunch of perks that help deal with whatever issue is complained about. This is why generators have been consistently complained about for so long. Instead of looking at generator speed and Dead by Daylight match pace, they would rather just feed you another gen regression perk and call it a day. The same goes for tunneling, slugging, or survivors. Instead of looking at those issues, why they exist, and attempting to fix them, Behavior would rather just make perks that can hush complaints about those issues.
So that right there is another statement I think that is very telling of where this creator is coming from with their perspective, because keep in mind that you are accurate to state, like, hey, you know, the gen speed is a problem, which once again I have to say, I thought gen regression was in a good spot. I thought the gens were fine. I mean, according to the 2 videos we saw, right? I mean, that's what we're hearing. Now we're hearing that it like we could play it again, actually, just to make sure we heard it correctly. And like I was saying, I thought, you know, I could have sworn we're hearing this correctly.
Rather just feed you another gen regression mental flaws with it, when they could just instead add a bunch of perks that help deal with whatever issue is complained about. This is why generators have been consistently complained about for so long. Instead of looking at generator speed and Dead by Daylight match pace, they would rather just feed you another gen regression perk and call it a day.
So there you have it, right? Played it again just for you guys, so you can hear it again. And I have to say, what are we talking about, brother? I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know. I'm a little confused, right? That's already step 1. Step 2.
The same goes for tunneling, slugging, or survivor.
He tries to slip in like the tunneling and slugging part there, like as if we weren't gonna notice. Try to slip it in there, like no. We have our eyes open and our ears completely open as well. We know what we're trying to push here, okay? Now keep in mind that something like tunneling and slugging is not an issue. It is complained about constantly, but it is still, at the end of the day, purely strategic play, and it's being used and gaslit and weaponized by the survivor, like by not like just the entire like DVD community has this weird sort of I don't even know how to describe it, like this weird mentality where if you're playing strategic on killer, for some reason it's a bad thing. For some reason it's to be complained about. For some reason only the killers can have to just take the L, lose all the time, never play strategic, just play with their eyes closed all the time. And I have to, and it's once again, like I keep stating, it's just more just gaslighting and farting in each other's faces to try and make it seem as if it's such a bad thing to just utilize strategy when survivors do the same exact thing. There are strategic survivor plays. Why is it only that one side can be strategic and not the other? That doesn't make sense. So trying to like, and even with this, like in passing, we're like, well, tunneling and slugging is one of the problems. Like, no, it's not. Like, at the end of the day, it's still a skill issue. Now, immerse survivors, that's just something that I don't really understand how you're supposed to counter that per se, unless you're bringing builds for that, and not everybody's doing that. So that's not something that is directly something you can interact with. Gen speed has been the core problem for a very long time, and as much as they try to add perks to try to band-aid it, fix it, they nerf them anyway, so it doesn't even have any way to actually fix that problem. So no matter where you slice it, it boils down back to gen speed is still the problem, no matter what at this point. Like, it's already been said, it's already been shown, we have data to prove that.
Instead of looking at those issues, why they exist, and attempting to fix them, behavior would rather just make perks that can hush complaints about those issues.
And the thing is like I keep saying, tunneling and slugging are not issues. The only reason they even care about those things is because they're losing players, because those players are super hyper casuals that don't want to learn how to play. So the reason that it became a quote unquote issue is because now they're losing money. They're losing money because the hyper casuals just can't handle it. Now, why is it that a killer would utilize strategies? Why would they need to utilize strategies? In order to keep up with matches. What is it about the match that they need to be keeping track of? The generators. What are survivors doing even more efficiently with every single update, because everything keeps getting increased and buffed and all these crazy things? Gen speed, right? Because healing is faster. As I've stated many times, the hook times are longer, so you can save later, which adds more to gen speed. The the hook pulling, they changed that too. That's been nerfed, right? Well, for killer, I should say. It's been increased with an additional 10 seconds for both health states. So now there's more leeway to saving. There's faster healing speeds. There's also faster gen speeds as a proxy. You're not even having people quitting on hooks anymore, so that means less people are being eliminated. So all these things are contributing back to gen speed, plus on top of the fact that the gen perks exist. These are all encompassed, all coming together to go back to that core thing. Because this is the gameplay loop. Like, you're preventing one side from doing their objective. The other side wants to pull you away from the objective so that they can get it done. It's just how it goes. Like, I don't understand like how that's such a foreign concept.
At least I would say that if they hadn't tried to fix slugging and tunneling last year, we saw what happened when they tried to do that, and based on that alone, maybe it's better that they used perks instead of actually fixing their game. Or, behavior could just be better about listening to their player base instead of rushing the most diabolical changes out the door with no concern for the effect it'll have on the game. This is why perks feel so essential for the gameplay, but also don't. Killers that have to worry about certain problems, typically the weaker ones on the roster, can slap perks on to help with those issues. However, the stronger killers on that roster don't have to worry.
I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here because honestly, there wasn't too much to touch on, but it was still a lot of stuff that just really did not necessarily remain accurate, I would say. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments section, of course. Consider hitting the like and the sub button as well. And if you really want to support the channel, you can become a member on YouTube. You can be on Patreon, or even subbing on Twitch to have your name right off at the end of every video. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'll see you guys in the next one. Alright, let's go ahead and read off our members from Patreon. Pro King 101, YouTube members, Kargan Falcon, Evil Blade, Cap Courteous, WTF You're Not J-Lo, Evil Peach, Cozy Bozy, Theo Endire, Dole Whip, Noxus, Zero Mocker, Jack, Christian, and Crow Vader. And for the Twitch, we have Final Girl Bunny, Leona Art, Zazabu, Evil Blade, Danica, Crow Vader, Cake is a Road, Zeneron, Ginsburg, Mr. Morik, Kevin, Zero Mocker, Ashai Boo, and Gryffindor. Appreciate you guys supporting. Really means a lot. If you want to become a member, you can go ahead and join through Patreon or YouTube members, or even sub on Twitch. See you guys in the next one.